I will call the meeting to order, and we will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Just a few words about the annual school district meeting. This is not a regular board meeting. At regular board meetings, board members make the motions, second the motions, and vote. But at the annual school district, that same right is extended to all participants, people that are members of the district. So please know that you are voting members of this meeting. And with that, we will move down to item C, which is to elect a meeting chairperson.
Mr. President, I will nominate Mike Hoffman.
Any other nominations? Third call for nominations.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to close nominations and elect Mike Hoffman, meeting chair.
I'll second that.
There's a motion on the floor made by Rick Mullen, seconded by Joe Martin, to close nominations and elect Mike Hoffman as meeting chair. Is there any discussion on that? All in favor, please respond with aye.
Aye.
And opposed, nay. Thank you. We will move on to item D, approval of the agenda. Mr. Dahman, do you know of any changes or corrections to the agenda?
There are no changes to the agenda.
Thank you.
I would move to approve the agenda as presented.
I'll second that.
There's a motion on the floor made by Dave Holterman, seconded by Rick Mullen, to approve the agenda as presented. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. And opposed, nay. Motion carries. The agenda is approved. We will move down to new business, starting with the district overview. So I will turn the microphone over to Rich Dahman, and I believe he is going to be assisted by Susan Probst.
Welcome, everyone. Yes. Don't know what this is on. How about now? Sounds much better. I'm Superintendent Rich Dahman. I want to welcome all of you to the annual meeting for the school district of Milton. We're going to start by sharing a little bit of a district overview with all of you. And then that will be by our Director of Student Services, Susan Probst, and myself, and then we'll turn things over to Carrie Bradley for the financial portion of this presentation. But the first thing I want to highlight are the different schools that we have across our district. And you can see listed on the slide our elementary schools, Northside Intermediate, Milton Middle School, Milton High School, and our projected enrollment for the coming year. We won't know where we land for our actual enrollment, but this is based on our returning students and new students. This is our estimated or projected enrollment for the coming year. We also have 9 different municipalities that make up our school district. The city of Janesville, the city of Milton, and then the different townships: Fulton, Harmony, Janesville, Johnstown, Koshkonong, Lima, and Milton. And you can see what's listed for each of those is the percent of district property value in the previous year. So you can get an idea of the scale for each of those different municipalities. And I'm going to turn things over to Carrie Bradley to talk through some things that we're doing with capital improvements, both in our planning and then also some things that are going on right now.
Thank you. Give that a try. I just have three pieces that I want to touch on at a high level. And the first one is I want to reflect or acknowledge that the district has a long history of having a 5-year capital maintenance and improvement plan that has been referred to as the living document. And that history is around identifying facility needs and prioritizing them. Most recently, the Board of Ed is working on savings for the future with the long-term capital improvement trust fund. And then the last piece is the action, and the action was the passing of the referendum, and we're nearing the end of that project, and working on many of the facilities to meet those needs. So this is the example. In March, the board will receive a presentation from Mr. Schanz, and he will propose projects for the school year. These are our projects for the current school year related to that 5-year plan. This year, there's about $700,000 from the general fund and $50,000 from the community service fund. The long-term capital improvement trust fund that I mentioned was initiated in April of 2020. And with that, the 10-year capital plan is kind of an extension of the 5-year and kind of takes that next step looking forward. We know life will change considerably beyond 5 years, but we want to be monitoring systems and buildings and kind of get that further look as to what might be needed. And then at the end of this fiscal year, we had almost a $500,000 balance in that fund. And the last thing I want to just touch on is the referendum that was passed, as I have mentioned. The construction of all of the work is almost complete. Last year, or beginning, I was getting messed up because it's this year, next year, last year, because it's still kind of in between for me. But in the prior fiscal year, or the prior school year, the elementary K-3 buildings were able to open for the first day of school. And those improvements not only improved the space and environment for students, we also added square footage, which allowed us to discontinue rent of a 4K facility. The middle school projects are complete, and I have heard that there is a celebration and excitement around the ability to have an entire grade level in the cafeteria for a lunch period. So I think I heard right, I think I heard well, and in addition to celebrating, I think the middle school is also looking forward to efficiencies or opportunities that might allow having the students all with one lunch period. And then finally, the high school projects are nearing completion. You were probably aware that the STEM wing was completed and the pool was celebrated. We also have classroom improvements in the field house. And as noted in the slide, you can all get out your appointment books, or phones now, I guess you want to do appointment books, sorry. And note that the ribbon cutting is going to be October 24th at 2 p.m. So another opportunity to celebrate the improvements in our facilities related to those referendum dollars that were approved by the voters and also worked on by prior boards and administration. So at this point, I am going to pass it back to Rich, and Rich and Susan are going to share our plans for teaching and learning in the next year.
Thank you, Carrie. And before I highlight our district's vision and mission statements, I want to just reinforce that upcoming ribbon cutting ceremony on October 24th. If all of you obviously are here at the high school and maybe have had a chance to see some of the great things that we've put in place, but we want to formally recognize all the work that's been done on those referendum projects at that time. We'll be sending out more information on the details for that coming up and offering some invitations to some people who have worked on those projects over the years. As you can see on the slide, our mission statement and our district's vision statement are listed, and they have a lot of similarities. Our vision is that we believe in opportunities, achievement, and community for all. And our missions, the School District of Milton, in partnership with the community, prepares our students for achievement and lifetime readiness by providing opportunities for all. And we really highlight all the different parts of that as we do our work as a school district. If you look back to that vision statement, you see the three core areas there of opportunities, achievement, and community. You hear those a lot, whether you're a staff member, a student, parent, or community member. We talk about those things a lot. We also are making sure, especially going into this coming year, we talk about the for all and what does for all mean to us as a school district. As we're coming off a different model of education over the last year and a half than we're used to, we think it's really important that we're alert to where every individual student is and what their needs are. So we're really going to be focusing on making sure that we meet those needs of all students. Within our strategic plan and underneath the vision and the mission statement, we have 5 strategic objectives, or we sometimes refer to those as pillars. And there are different areas that we focus on. Recently, the Strategic Planning Committee of the school board and our administration team met to start looking at identifying areas in these pillars as goals and strategies that we want to utilize to make sure that we're making progress towards those goals. In the first one, teaching and learning, that's really our focus on what's happening in our schools, particularly in our classrooms. What are our expectations for our teachers and our instruction? What are our expectations for our learners and our desired outcomes for all of our students? In relationships, climate, and culture, we talk about the idea that everyone is feeling welcome in the schools, that people are treating each other respectfully, and that we're teaching students those skills and also having expectations for all of our community in those areas. In the area of high quality staff, it's vital for us to make sure that we're both hiring and retaining high quality staff and also offering professional development and training opportunities so that all of our staff members continue to expand their skills. Community engagement is vitally important for all of the different stakeholders in our community, so that's something that we focus on. And then facilities and services are really kind of the behind-the-scenes operations of the district. What are we doing to make sure our facilities are safe and up to the level that we would expect them to be, and then all the behind-the-scenes services that take place that allow us to operate as a school district fall into that area. So as we continue to work under our strategic plan, we utilize those 5 core strategic objectives. And then I am going to turn things over to Susan Probst to talk about some of the exciting things that are coming up this year.
He's a little taller than I am. So our priorities for this year are focusing on improved universal practices. Universal practices are what all students in our district get. We want to be able to apply evidence or data to make decisions on that universal experience. We want to look at immediate needs for our students. What do we need right away in September? But then also look at that long-term need. What do we need 5 to 6 months from now? And then finally, to address equity concerns. So when we look at that data, we compare how does that data compare girls and boys? How does it compare kids with disabilities and kids without disabilities? How does social economic impact their performance? And then also, what about race? Oops, one too many. Sorry, Carrie. I don't use Adele. I think I skipped a slide, so I'm going to talk about it. You can just pretend that you can see it, okay? PLCs. The PLCs are that Monday afternoon component where the kids go home a little bit early and your teachers have an opportunity to talk. They're really focused on 4 things. We're talking about what do we want our students to learn, because we want that to be consistent and predictable. So it's not just that all 2nd grade students are getting the same thing, but in reading, that's aligned from 1st grade all the way through high school. We want to look at how do we know that they know what they know. So how are we assessing and evaluating what we've taught and what they've been able to internalize? We want to be able to look at how we respond when kids don't learn, And we also want to look at, well, how do we respond if kids already know it, so that they don't have to spend time there. Now I'm on this one. PLCs look at universal, and besides the academic component of the universal, we're also looking at a couple of other things. And most of these are PD opportunities for our staff in this next, either in the last couple of weeks or is coming up in the next week. Avid is addressing instructional practices, so it's not just the curriculum we're looking at, but how the curriculum is delivered. The grading practices and technology are supporting how we're evaluating students and what they've learned. And then responsive classrooms and second step address effective classroom management, responsive teaching, so that we find the needs but the strengths of students as well, and it creates a safe and predictable and joyful and inclusive classroom environment. And lastly, those things all focused on the universal. We also want to look at that unfinished learning piece. How do we identify students who are still in need of additional supports? And then how do we select the intervention to meet the needs of those additional supports, and then monitoring progress. If we pick the right intervention, we should see gains. If we don't see gains, we want to pick a different intervention so that we can find a way to help our students. And then lastly, updating our multi-level systems of support. That's taking all that we've learned and making sure we create a document so we don't have to reinvent the wheel. And I believe I'm turning this back over to Carrie. Oh, to Joe, I'm sorry.
Thanks, Susan. We're going to move down to item B under new business, district financial report, and I will turn it over to Joe Martin, who is our board treasurer.
Okay, thank you, Mike. And so just as to be a quick intro and a segue to Carrie, obviously you folks know that kind of dual functions of the annual meeting is an overview of sorts that we just heard. Second function relates to all the money, right? What happens in our district financially. One of the policies, mandates that I, as the treasurer, give an annual report of all disbursements and all income of the district. Rather than me do that in partial and then have it supplemented by Carrie's information, most practices have been, most meetings, annual meetings have been, most of the financial report given by our business director. We have been blessed in Milton with wonderful guidance and support from all of our directors of business services. Carrie being no exception to that. She does a great job for us and works in a great partnership with the board to monitor what we're doing budget-wise, both in the current year we're working on and in the years that we've got on our doorstep, if you will. So with that, I'm going to let Carrie tell you folks sort of what has happened, and then she has another piece, of course, with what we need to get done tonight for moving forward.
Alrighty, so with the financial report, there are three things that we want to talk about. And this is a very high-level report, as Joe said, per policy, and the expectation is that this is our treasurer's report. So as you know, or don't know, our fiscal year begins July 1st. So on June 30th, I'm the one running around saying Happy New Year on July 1st, and they all look at you like, what are you doing? But that's my role. So we celebrated the new year, and we begin the new financial year. So last July 1, 2020, we had a fund balance of about $54 million. To that, we add our receipts, we subtract our disbursements, and we get our ending fund equity of about $15 million. That is then divided amongst the different funds that we have. Each fund has a purpose. And at year end, the fund that began the year with the largest balance, and then we've spent most of that balance, as we have talked about, is this capital projects fund. So to me, this generally all makes sense, and the details are by fund. One thing that's going to look slightly different from prior years is this special projects fund. At one point in time, the majority of that fund, well, it still is a majority, but it's special education, and then also gifts. And the gift portion was historically small. So that's gifts that we hold on to, not gifts given to the general fund. Last year, we transitioned from using custodial accounts for our student activities to now including those in this Special Projects Fund 21. So as we go through future documents, it's going to look a little different than prior year, and that is why. And that Special Projects Fund balance is revenues from student clubs and activities, and then also gifts and donations to the district. The second thing we want to talk about and celebrate is the debt service fund. We're talking about the $59.9 million referendum. We have made several payments, and so as of this June 30th, our outstanding debt is a little over $54 million. So we're on our way. Got a few years left, but we'll get there. And then the last piece that we need to talk about, and I think it's actually per statute, is the Employee Benefit Trust Fund. And this is a fund that the district accounts for, that we contribute to, but it is seen as a trust fund for the employees. And this fund is used to help pay for post-employment health insurance benefits that are currently afforded to our employees. So that concludes last year, and so when the chair is ready, we can move forward with the current year with the budget presentation.
The chair is ready. Thanks, Gary.
Sure.
We'll move on to letter D.
Okay. The budget presentation is at a very high level, and I had left a very high level summary of the budget on the table in the back, but also, for those of you that need more information, if you go into board docs, there's a supplement, and that will take you further into what's going on with the budget. But for the purposes of this meeting, we're just going to stay at a very high level and talk about the district and our resources and what we use those resources for. And then at the end of the presentation is the hearing portion where you all have an opportunity to speak if you so choose to do. Okay. So before we get too far into the budget, we're going to talk about two things this year. We're going to talk about resources, and then we have to talk about fund accounting and descriptions, as exciting as that is for everyone, because that's really the basis of what we do. Okay? But on the resources side here, you all need to be aware that we plan to use the $2.5 million in additional revenue authority from our non-recurring referendum that passed last year. We plan on using that and need that to sustain our budget. The community should be aware that 80% of our revenues and resources are impacted by the revenue limit. Another word I have used at board meetings is controlled revenue. And those revenues are from property tax and general state aid. We also need to be aware that for the current school year, when the state passed the budget, they put no increase in the revenue limit, but they did increase general aids. And so if you have a limit made up of aids and levy, aids go up, revenue limit doesn't go up, that's likely to impact our levy in a positive way, meaning the levy will go down, but it also means that we won't have as many resources overall in state and local funds. And then the last thing is that we are planning on using one-time federal funds to make up for annual cost increases that we are not making up through an increase in the revenue limit. And so if you're attuned to board meetings, we are frequently just talking about this one-time federal funds are going to be used, and so we just need to be aware as we move forward that the consequences of that. This graph, which somebody else made and I really like it, so I took it. The blue bar then shows your local sources, and the gold bar is the state sources, and the green bar is the federal sources. And you can see that there's quite a dramatic increase in the use of federal sources of revenue for our current year. So here's the fun part. The accounting system we use is called WFR, and it stands for the Wisconsin Uniform Financial Accounting Requirements. It's a chart of accounts, there's a code structure, and all public school districts in Wisconsin use this. There are different dimensions, including fund, source, object, and function, which you will hear me use those terms. I'm not going to go into any detail about what they are now. As I said, budget information is broken down by fund, because each fund is for a specific purpose. And then there are a set of regulations related to each fund as well. And I just got to share. Can I share with you? So I'm watching this presentation from somebody out of state because they're changing our financial software, and he kept calling it WOOFAR. And so those of us that have had woofer for a long time kind of twitch when people call it WOOFAR. So there's a French, yes, WOOFAR. Anyway, thanks for letting me share. I appreciate your perseverance there. Okay, so then we're going to go on to the budget. And what's coming up is we're going to do the revenue budget by fund. And we're going to talk about revenues, which are by source, and then expenditures by purpose, which is function. And then, as I had mentioned, there's quite a bit of information in that booklet if you want more. I could do this all day. I didn't set my timer. I was only supposed to do 15 minutes. All right, we'll keep moving. So the first piece we have here is the general fund, and that's for general operations. And so that is most of our day-to-day activity. It's not debt service, and it's not the building fund or the school nutrition fund. So it's our day-to-day general business. And just to orient you to the document, we usually have 3 years of data. We have audited in 1920. At the time this was put together, our audit was not complete yet. And then we have the budget that the board is approved for review at the meeting, okay? And so you can see the different sources of revenue that we have. If you think of the chart that I showed you and look at local source 200, you see that 15.2 million, and you can see that's a little bit less than the prior year. Much of that is our tax levy. And then if you look at state sources, which is the 600, you can see that has gone up from 25.1 to 25.8 million. And then the federal sources are also higher than the prior year as well. So that's just the numbers piece of the chart that we looked at. Another way to look at this is a pie chart. And the takeaway from the pie chart is that the local portion of our, what do we have, $45 million budget or so, 34% is supported with local funds, and that is primarily the tax levy. Then we talked about the sources of the revenue side, so now we're going to move to the expenditure side. And instead of talking about object at this high level, we're going to talk about the function, and function translates into purpose. Okay, what is the purpose of the money that we're spending? And the first line says instruction, and that's 100,000 function. And this is primarily, as you can see from the description, related to activities in the classroom, instructional activities in the classroom. And then the 200, our next highest category, is support activities, or activities related to supporting students. And that can include the library program and the libraries, because they're not directly in the classroom. And then that also includes the business office, it includes transportation. The 200s those are some examples. And then the last bucket we have here is non-program transactions, which doesn't mean a whole lot to most people. But that is made up of interfund transfers, and then also instructional, we pay for instructional service and tuition. And with regard to that one, we need to be mindful that a good portion, or not a good portion, a portion of that is related to substitute teachers. So when I go to the next slide, okay, and we say that 64% of our costs are around employees, 21% are purchased services. A slice of that also includes the substitute teachers that we purchase as well. And then the remainder of the chart kind of shows where the rest of our money goes here. I already talked at a high level about the Special Projects Fund, and that this includes the gifts and grants and now student clubs and fundraising, as well as the Special Education Fund. And if we look at that fund, again, you know, the majority of that is for employees. So the second job I had doing this, one of the people I worked for used to talk about how we're in the people business, and you know, I mean, that is quite true when you look at what we do. Not only are we serving students and people in our community, we also employ a lot of people. The next fund to look at is a debt service fund. So if you recall, we borrowed $59.9 million, and we paid some of the debt off. This is where we pay the debt off, is in the debt service fund, and that's where we make principal and interest payments. So on the revenue side, the $4 million is mostly the tax levy, and on the expenditure side, that is principal and interest payments. And the capital projects fund, then you can see we started out with the $59 million, and at the end of the year, we have about $45 million left, and then we're planning on spending that out in the current fiscal year, with the exception of the $500,000 that we put in the trust fund that we had talked about. So this is a combination of the referendum money as well as that long-term capital improvement trust fund. That is a mouthful. I don't know who came up with that. Then we also have a separate fund, and this is our school meals program. We have Fund 80, which is a community service fund, and this is primarily to support the MREC programs and then Schulberg Park. We, as a school district, have a public park in Schulberg Park, and we use the community service fund to help care for that park. And then the last fund to talk about is the Cooperative Programs Fund. And one of the things that I've been working on is identifying areas where we can maybe make things a little less complicated, especially in the business office and some of the financial transactions related to having a cooperative program. And historically, it was a cooperative program for the MECAS Alternative Ed program, but over time we had fewer and fewer districts participating. So there was no point in going through the multiple accounting entries and other tracking that had to go, having it in a whole separate fund as a cooperative program. So we are no longer going to have it in this separate program, and you can tell because you can see there's no budget for next year. The program still exists, it will continue, and I believe that it is open for other districts to participate. We're just going to do it on a district tuition basis rather than having a cooperative program. So this slide in the required DPI format, okay, is showing us the all expenditures, and so it takes all of those funds and sums them up. And so to get some kind of a comparative figure, you back out interfund transfers because you can't count money twice when you're going between funds. And then in 1920 we did a refinancing, so that's kind of money in, money out, if you will. And then I also backed out the capital projects funds, so that when we get to the end of the year-to-year comparison, you have something that you can compare. And you can see that this year's budget right now is, when we do everything, all funds, 1.4% less than the prior year. And here's the slide that you've all been waiting for. Tax levy time. And that's part of the reason why we're here, in addition to learning about the district's budget. One of the things that you will do later in the meeting is vote a levy. And so you can see when you look at the general fund that our general fund levy right now, based on estimates, is projected to be less than last year's levy. And again, at this point in time, we work with estimates, and we will find out in October what our state aid is going to be. Remember when I talked about the tax levy and state aid interacting? Okay, we will find out on October 15th what our actual aid certification is, and then we'll have the students coming to school, and we'll find out what our student count is. But at this point in time, this is where our budget is at, and this is the tax levy that would need to be approved to support the budget that we've put together. So when the chair is ready, I do believe that this is the electorate's opportunity to comment on the budget if you so choose to do, when the chair is ready to move to the next agenda item.
Thank you, Carrie. We will move to the next agenda items and and just for the public's knowledge, there are 2 microphones on either side of the auditorium that if you have any questions or comments, you can certainly go to one of those microphones.
Do you have a question? Yes, please.
Sure.
So just a quick question. So based on this, you're saying that the tax levy will decrease 2.54% from last year. Is that not right?
That is accurate, yes.
Is there a reason why it wouldn't have been put together just to make it flat? If the school is looking, is there an accounting reason behind that?
No, that's an excellent question, because I think you're going to prove what I was trying to say before. So I get to say it again. All right. Ideally, we like to hold, generally speaking, taxpayers like the levy to be flat. Districts try and make the levy as flat as they can. Okay? But when you look at that general fund levy, we don't control that. That is controlled by state-imposed revenue limits. And so, as I said before, there's a calculation, and it says this is the total revenue that you can get from general aid and tax levy. Okay? And what happened is, with the last budget, good news, they put more money in the general aid formula, which is very good news. But they did not at the same time increase the revenue limit. So more aid, less levy. Now, there might be some other options come fall that we could look at to try and keep the overall levy a little more flat. But right now, this is where we're at.
The reason I ask is obviously it's like anything else. You decrease it, and then next year you increase it. That assesses taxpayers for flat. Healthcare renewals flat. It's like okay, good.
Yes, no, that is definitely the preferred position to be in. But as we apply, but the Department of Public Instruction is going to apply this calculation. And so, right now we're in a position where our levy is going down. So since you're mentioning this, let's take the opportunity to just talk about the future. So, we're glad the state put more aid in the formula. We get more state aid, but locally, we're experiencing our levy go down. I'm not sure what they're going to do the next time the budget cycle happens, because we are using federal money, which is one-time money. So my concern, which you have just brought up wonderfully, is that, but we'll see what happens, that in order for us to be getting caught up, I'm concerned about the jump. But again, the more money they put in the aid formula, the less we're going to jump. But I don't have the crystal ball on that, and we're hanging on for the ride. But that is an excellent point, and it's not necessarily one for this meeting, but as we look to the future, that is something we're going to be mindful of, is what are we going to do in the future, and how are we going to adjust to the ebb and flow of the levy. Absolutely. Thank you.
So I guess that goes to my other question that you had earlier, which was you're using the federal funds to make up the gap.
Correct.
Which then foresee long term is we're going to have a gap in those federal funds.
They will go away,
Go away.
and our state legislature, who has directed us to use them more or less,
Bring taxes down.
well, whatever the, yes.
Whatever the plan was, they
Yeah,
can-
right. I mean, if we step back, it's right. It's kind of like, what lever do you pull? Politics aside, these are the things we have to work with, and what are the future consequences of those? And so, just an awareness thing. If you have an opportunity, you certainly can share that concern, and it's not a this year thing. It's really a next year, following year concern, and there may be a plan to remedy it. So I.
Thank you for that explanation.
But is there any stipulation when you take federal funding, one-time federal funding, if you're taking, is there any stipulation when you take that money?
So the question, can I just repeat your question? Okay, so the question is, and you can tell me if I got it right or not, are there any stipulations when you take federal money? And I can't tell if everybody's smiling, but the answer to that is yes, there are. Just as when we take money from the state, there are often requirements, there are also federal requirements as well. And the ESSER funds, there's a 1, 2, and 3, and there's 3 years of federal funds. They have different requirements that we have to follow. And then I think when the budget was approved, the governor has also committed some federal funds to schools. And I am not sure, they haven't told us what the requirements are as well with that yet, so we're waiting to see. But yes, absolutely.
Are any of those related to like any stipulations of how you handle COVID-19? Will you take that?
Not with ESSER 1, that's already happened. I'm not aware of the governor's share having stipulations. And we are working on the ESSER 2 right now. ESSER 3 is got a variety of requirements that we are still looking into. There's a set aside of 20%. There's stakeholder input. There's a lot of layers to that one. And I believe that one asks that we share our plan.
Okay. So if there is anything, there will be a meeting about it before we take on that, so you expect our children and stipulations on how to react to the virus.
ESSER 3, I'm not sure I'm answering. So the question is, will there be an opportunity for public input?
Correct.
There you go, okay. So the ESSER 3 does have a stakeholder process. So as we start, if you want to say peeling back the onion on what that looks like, and I also think that there'll be more guidance coming out as well. Because right now there's some information for school districts, but I'm not sure it's what I would say quite complete yet. But there is definitely an opportunity for stakeholder input on ESSER 3 round money.
Thank you.
Yep, that's my understanding. They're on the Department of Public Education's website. I tell you, do you just want to shoot me an email and I'll give you some links you can look? Okay. Yeah, no, if you need help finding things on our website, feel free to reach out. And would you preface it with any questions so know what it is? Sure.
I just have one question. Maybe you can answer this for me. So, can you answer how is state aid calculated? Is that calculated based on enrollment numbers of students?
Okay, I'm gonna try and I'm trying to do a short version. No, this is like what do you think? 20-minute presentation? Okay. I've done this presentation with the board before. So,
So Carrie, could you repeat the question to people that
Sure.
that didn't hear it?
So the question is, how is state aid calculated? Correct?
Correct. And in particular, how is enrollment a part of that, student enrollment?
Okay, student enrollment is one factor in the formula, and there are 2 others. But student enrollment is a factor. So let me go through the factors when I cut to the chase. How enrollment affects our life. Okay? So when you're speaking enrollment, we need to be talking about residents of our school district. Okay, not students that open enroll in. So it's any child that lives in our district. All right? And as with a revenue limit, state aid is calculated on a per pupil basis. So when they say pupil, it's pupil FTE, because 4Ks are 0.6. Okay, so the cost, that's one of the drivers. And I think that's where you're going here, right?
Correct.
Yes.
So if, for example, if somebody were to go to a virtual charter school or were to homeschool, that would affect the district's funding. At least, probably not that this year, but perhaps in the coming years.
So it depends. Those are 2 very different things.
Well, I
Homeschooling?
understand, yes. Okay, so homeschool would pull completely, but
Homeschool child, right, is if the parent fills out the homework application with the Department of Public Instruction, and they accept responsibility for educating their child. They would be in our census count, but they would not be in our resident enrollment account. Depending upon what virtual charter they attend, if it's a public virtual charter, then they will be included in our account. And just a reminder, we also have a public charter option virtual as well. The school district does.
okay,
People that
just
don't.
considering what's
Right,
going
so-
forward after this annual meeting, I just wanted to make that point, that enrollment will affect future funding.
Yes, it will, as it has across the state of Wisconsin. So the other piece with enrollment to remember is that when it comes to state aid, we are all in it together. And if you look at statewide enrollment is down. So it all has to do with how our numbers line up with everybody else's. But yes, that is absolutely a factor in the aid formula.
Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions, comments? If not, this is an action item, so I would entertain a motion. There is a suggested motion on the screen. I would entertain a motion from someone from the floor.
I move that the district levy a tax of $14,683,741 for current operations, $4,018,400 for referendum approved debt, and $300,000 for community services for all funds total tax levy of $19,002,141.
I heard it from Tracy, yes. So there is a motion on the floor made by Stephen Jones, seconded by Tracy Hanna, that the district levy a tax of $14,683,741 for current operations, $4,018,400 for referendum approved debt, and $300,000 for community services, for a total all-fund tax levy of $19,002,141. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor respond with aye. Aye. And opposed, nay. Motion carries. Thank you. Moving on to item E under new business is to fix the compensation for board members and authorize expenses. Present compensation is $2,500 for the president and other members $2,000 per year. And again, there is a recommended motion on the screen.
I move to set compensation for board members at $2,000 and the board president at $2,500 per year, and to authorize the payment of actual and necessary expenses incurred by the Board of Education members while traveling in the performance of duties.
There is a motion on the floor made by Sarah Stuckey, seconded by Al Rail, to set compensation for board members at $2,000 and the board president at $2,500 per year, and to authorize the payment of actual and necessary expenses incurred by Board of Education members while traveling in the performance of duties. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor respond with aye. Aye. And opposed, nay. Motion carries. Thank you. And we will move on to item F. Item F is just giving the Board of Education permission to set the date and time for next year's annual meeting.
I move to allow the Board of Education to establish the date and time for the 2022 annual meeting as provided under section 120.08 of the Wisconsin statutes.
Is there a second? Okay, there is a motion on the floor made by Chris Kuckendorf and seconded by Tracy Hanna to allow the Board of Education to establish the date and time for the 2022 annual meeting as provided under section 120.08 of the Wisconsin State Statutes. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please respond with aye. Aye. And opposed, nay. Motion carries. Before I entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting, I would like to thank particularly thank Carrie and thank Rich and thank Susan for all the time and energy you put into this. There's a lot of time that goes into this meeting behind the scenes. I'd also like to thank Jeremy Bilhorn, Michael Dorn, and Carrie Klubba for pivoting so quickly to have the meeting here so we could accommodate everyone that wants to attend. I really appreciate all the efforts that went into that, so thank you very much.
Mr. Chair, I make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Motion on the floor to adjourn the meeting in a second. All in favor respond with aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Thank you again for coming. This meeting is adjourned. We'll start the regular school board meeting. How about if we give people a little bit of time? We'll start at 7:35.
I'm not waiting to see you again, but the agendas are right